Found in the Lost, the Leonidas Corporation, Book 1, written by Tarina Deaton, read by Itsy, Bitsy, Book Bits. Chapter 1. Kinley Dunn paced the length of the small arrivals hall of the Flores, Guatemala airport, 34 steps one way, 34 steps the other way. She made the trip 12 times, checking her phone at the end of each round trip for any message from her mentor. Nothing. Dr. Banks wasn't answering any of her calls either. She checked the date, her previous emails, the calendar invite, her tickets, her hotel reservation in Carmelita, everything she could think of to verify she was where she was supposed to be, when she was supposed to be. Being invited on this dig was the chance of a lifetime, especially since she wasn't a field-trained archaeologist. This was her opportunity to show that it didn't matter if all of her experience was in the classroom. So what if she didn't have thousand-year-old dirt under her nails? She still had something to offer. Stopping at the end of another round trip, she closed her eyes. You were specifically invited on this trip because you did what no one else has been able to do. Your input into this discovery will be invaluable and change everything scholars thought they knew about Mayan culture and history. You are not a fraud. She sighed after whispering her self-pep talk and glanced around, her gaze catching on the mop of blonde curls and broad shoulders of a guy sitting in one of the many waiting areas. Nice. Even a square jar and 5 o'clock shadow couldn't distract her from the predicament of being stranded at an airport in Guatemala. No matter what she told herself, she could not worry that someone had decided she shouldn't be there and just forgot to tell her because she was insignificant and not worth the time. Slipping her arms from the straps of her large pack, she let it fall to the ground and stifled a groan. Bending at the waist to stretch the abused muscles of her lower back, she settled the pack between her legs and sat down. She had to bite the bullet. She had to call the other team lead. Taking a deep breath, she hit the dial button and breathed out slowly while it rang. Dr. Baird. Kinley expelled the rest of her breath upon hearing his curt answer. Dr. Baird, this is Kinley Dunn. I'm so sorry to bother you, but have you heard from Dr. Banks? She was supposed to meet me. No, I haven't. Why are you calling me? She was supposed to meet me at the Flores airport to take me to Carmelita, but she's not here. And? She looked down at the toes of her well-worn hiking boots and tapped her feet. Do you know if there's someone else coming to meet me? How the hell would I know that? Quit wasting my time with your petty issues and figure it out. With that, he ended the call. Kinley pressed her lips together and mouthed, asshole. One of the most knowledgeable archaeologists in the field or not, he was still a grade-A jerk. Since he hadn't told her that she'd wasted her time and was no longer needed, she would have to figure out how to get herself to Carmelita now and figure out what happened to Dr. Banks later. She opened the web browser on her phone and searched for transportation from Flores to Carmelita. Damn it, she muttered. The last bus left 20 minutes ago. Excuse me. Kinley looked up from her phone. A man leaned over the seat between them, smiling at her with his perfect white teeth. She hadn't even noticed him sit down. In a crisp white button-down and black slacks with his hair perfectly coiffed, he looked out of place among the tourists and local travelers. I couldn't help but overhear your conversation, he said. I am heading to Carmelita myself. I'm happy to offer you a ride. His English held a hint of an accent, but she couldn't tell from where. The tiny hairs on the back of her neck stood up. Nothing in his outward appearance screamed sinister serial killer, but something didn't feel right about the offer. Call it her sixth sense or female intuition, but whatever it was told her not to accept the offer. Thank you, but I'll figure it out, she said. It can be very tedious to get from Flores to Carmelita on the bus. I have a private car. I promise I'm a perfect gentleman. Every hair on her body was waving at her, shouting, Stranger, danger! I'm meeting a group of friends at their hotel tonight, she lied. I'll ride with them in the morning. He shrugged and tilted his head. As you wish. Good luck on your journey. He stood and slipped a hand in his pants pockets to pull out a pair of sunglasses, sliding them on his face as he walked towards the exit. Where was his luggage? He didn't even have a briefcase or a carry-on, nothing to indicate he'd flown into the airport. Her shoulders shook as a shudder ran up her back. She glanced towards the row of tour companies on the far side of the arrival hall. Maybe there was a tour bus she could hop on. Slinging her large hiking pack over her shoulder, she kept one eye on the path ahead of her and scrolled through the list of tour companies while she headed in that direction. One company looked promising. They had private cars for smaller groups instead of buses. She paused and scanned the area, finding the small counter for the tour company toward the far corner. Tucking her phone into the pocket of her crossbody travel purse, she strode with purpose right up until the moment her feet stopped moving and her upper body lurched forward. The cracked and dusty tile rushed toward her, and the heavy pack tumbled off her shoulder, throwing her even more off balance. She thrust out an arm to stop her fall and squeezed her eyes shut, bracing for impact. A tight hand encircled her waist and jerked her back into a hard wall. "Whoa there!" a low, deep voice said in her ear. Her heart fluttered in her chest as she realized the wall at her back was likely a warm chest belonging to the voice vibrating in her ear. The arm around her loosened and she inhaled deeply. "You good?" the voice asked. "Yes," she nodded. The arm released her slowly, the fingers trailing across the bottom of her ribs to rest on her hips. "Hang on a sec." Trying to ignore the goosebumps rolling across her skin, Kinley glanced down at the man now kneeling at her feet. He pressed a hand to the back of her knee, and she lifted her foot while he untangled the black mesh strap of his bag from her ankle. He stood, and her eyes followed him up as he rose. "Sorry about that," he said. "That's—" She swallowed and then shook her head. "It's my fault. I wasn't watching where I was going." His lips spread in a slow smile she could only describe as mischievous and a little sexy. "So it's neither of our faults, just a lucky happenstance." He bent down, picked up her pack as if it weighed nothing, and held it out to her. She wasn't sure almost biting the dust could be counted as lucky, but his catching her was definitely lucky. Taking her pack, she hefted it back onto her shoulder. "Yeah, thanks." "Anytime." He winked and resumed his seat. It clicked that his shoulders were the ones she'd admired earlier. He was even better looking up close. His long lashes brushed his high cheekbones and were slightly darker than his blonde hair, which was a little too long and curled around the tops of his ears. Could ears be cute? Giving herself a mental shake, she stepped toward the tour company. "Hola, habla ustedes inglés?" she asked. "Yes, I speak English." His name tag read Francisco. Thank goodness. She set her pack at her feet. "My Spanish is horrible. I need to get to Carmelita. Do you have any cars going that way I could ride with? I'm willing to pay for the transportation." "We can only transport tour guests. You have to pay for the entire tour." Kinley's shoulder sags. "Really? I only need a ride to Carmelita to meet with the rest of my group. The person who was supposed to meet me isn't here, and the last bus of the day left. The rest of my group is leaving Carmelita in the morning, and I really need to be there before them." "I'm sorry, senorita," he said softly. "The policy is very strict." Tired and on the verge of tears, she could only thank him for his time. She'd find a hotel for the night and take the first bus in the morning and figure out how to catch up with the group once she reached the office in Carmelita. "She could ride with us." Kinley's head whipped to the side. Her rescuer was rescuing her again. "Senor, if she's not booked on the trip, we can't act as a taxi for her." "It's fine. We originally booked 4 people, but one of our friends had to bail at the last minute. She's taking his spot." He raised his eyebrows and smiled. He leaned on the counter, causing his biceps to bulge, and strained the fabric of his green T-shirt. With his curly blonde hair and golden tan, he brought to mind an image of a surfer. Kinley glanced at Francisco. He looked skeptical, to say the least. "The cost of the tour is the same whether we have 2 people or 12, isn't it? So it doesn't matter if we add another person at the last minute." His tone was a little less friendly than before. Francisco sighed and asked for her passport. Euphoric relief surged through her. Trying not to grin like an idiot, she dug it out of her purse and handed it to him. Her rescuer tapped the counter and winked before returning to his seat and picking up his book. "Miss?" Francisco returned her passport and gestured towards the sitting area. "Your car will depart when the rest of the group arrives." "Thank you." Taking her bag over to the chair, she sat 1 seat away from the man who had saved her ass, literally and figuratively, twice in the last 15 minutes. Why wasn't her female intuition freaking out about his offer? It wasn't even an offer or an ask. He demanded Francisco add her to their trip, and she didn't even blink. Not only was her intuition not freaking out, her uterus was basically waving, her fallopian tubes back and forth, screaming, "Pick me, pick me!" "Thank you." She glanced at him through her eyelashes. "I wasn't looking forward to trying to find a hotel, then coming back here tomorrow to catch the bus." He placed a bookmark between the pages of his novel and shut it. "No problem. I guess it's fortuitous that my friend's flight was delayed. We were supposed to leave an hour ago." His words echoed what he'd said earlier when he stopped her from falling. "I guess it was," she said, smiling. "I'm Shane." He held out his hand and slid hers into it. "I'm..." Ben! A loud voice boomed behind them, and they both turned. Shane released her hand and stood up, a wide grin splitting his face. A shorter man with blonde hair dropped his bag and threw himself at Shane, who grabbed him in a bear hug. He wrapped his legs around Shane's waist and slapped his back with both hands. Get off me, you weirdo, Shane said, releasing his friend. His friend punched him on the shoulder. You like it weird. Another man, slightly taller than Shane, joined them. Way not to make a scene. He and Shane clasped hands and did the bro hug backslapping thing guys do. Good to see you, Ben. You too, Phantom. Kinley stared wide-eyed at the trio. Who were these guys? Let's get you guys checked in so we can go, Shane said. He turned and spotted her still sitting in the seats. Oh, hey, guys, this is... I didn't actually catch your name. Kinley, she said as she stood. Kinley, he repeated. This is Ace and Phantom. He pointed to each of the men. Guys, this is Kinley. She's catching a ride with us to Carmelita. Ace took her hand in his. Trust Ben to find the prettiest girl in a place. She glanced between the three. I thought his name was Shane. It is. We call him Ben because... Shane shoved Ace aside. That's a story for another time. You two go check in so we can get to the hotel sometime today and not scare our guest within the first 15 minutes of meeting her. Phantom grunted and approached the counter in an equally wide-eyed Francisco. Ace leaned around Shane. I'll tell you the story during the ride, he said in a stage whisper, then dodged Shane's half-hearted swing at him as he joined Phantom at the counter. Don't mind them. They're harmless for the most part, Shane said. Okay. The next couple of hours were definitely going to be interesting.